That's the subconscious working there.
We are going live on YouTube, and
see a member of the public.
Meet is being live streamed. And there we go. Bear with me 1 minute. I just need to make sure this is muted.
That's the subconscious working.
There we go. All right. All right, very good. We'll call to order this regular meeting of the Easton Reading Region 9 Joint Boards of Education Policy Committee at 9:06 a.m. on October 22nd, 2021. First item on the agenda is public comment. Hearing none, we'll go to committee member comment. Hearing none, we'll go to discussion and possible action. Our first item is the policy review series 5000, and actually what's listed as 4.2 is really 4.1.1, but it doesn't matter. I mean, it's still listed clearly. So the legislation related to student hazing and bullying. Before we dive into that, can I just ask from our administrators, are there any updates that we need to reserve time for? I believe we have a hard stop and lose quorum at 9:30 this morning.
We'll see.
Yep.
I have nothing pressing that we need to discuss this morning.
Okay.
So we're going back to talk about the bullying policy?
Yeah, I think we have some feedback.
Okay,
some
great.
notes and some feedback from that. And
okay.
Yep.
Maureen, are you doing that?
Yeah, I'll do that. I shared that with Chris and John, but yes, we had some feedback from you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, very good. So if we don't need to reserve time for the administrative updates, we'll dive in and specifically on our sort of 5000 series, student hazing and bullying. I think there was a first reading, and there's been some comments. So from each of the districts, there's been a first reading. Maureen, you had some comments?
I have some comments through Sarah Layberger, some of which I'll share with you with my own gloss on them, because some of which I responded to her and said, I don't know about this. Some of which definitely require administrative input because they're definitely adding to the things that the administration would have to do if they were adopted. So, basically I can run through them, and I'm only running through her email, right? I have not done the text mapping that some of her changes might imply. And I said to her specifically, I don't know about changing definitional terms because that requires all the text mapping. But maybe if they really resonate with with everyone here, then we should do that work.
Yeah, and I should note, I also received Sarah's email. I think she originally sent it to me and to Gwen, and I'm hesitant to reply back on those because I think we start to look like an illegal online meeting when we start talking about the content of sort of policy and how we might want to word things. So I also have some thoughts about that, but I'll let you start and then.
Okay. All right. The first idea that was advanced was to just add the word aggression to the definition in terms of hazing and bullying. And my immediate reaction to that was that gives us a new term to define, that being aggression. So I don't know how everyone feels about that, but wherever there was a new term that felt like it had to have more gloss, I was hesitant. I think that relational aggression is dealt with in the terms fairly well. So if you double define, it created an issue for me, but I'll toss that out to you guys and certainly listen to input on that point.
What would be aggressive that we would want to be considered bullying that wouldn't be covered by the current definition of bullying? What's an example?
I do not have an example that was advanced to me, but I didn't do, the kind of deep dive that would say, well, what do you think, right?
It was mostly a rhetorical question. I didn't expect you to have an answer. I'm trying to think out loud.
I mean, I suppose that you're talking about, there are lots of text terms that have double definitions, right? Where one thing could subsume others. And maybe there's a suggestion that aggression is sort of like the umbrella term, which itself subsumes harassment and bullying. I thought of aggression as a kind of tough to pin down thing, a little bit more tough to pin down thing.
I would worry about that term being a little bit malleable to the eye of the person trying to use it to their advantage.
yeah, I think that was my sense as well.
Uh,
So, okay.
John, can you bring the policy up on your screen?
Sure.
And, in my experience, when dealing with bullying situations in schools, I would say that 90% of the time bullying is actually not aggressive. And the reason why bullying sometimes is tough to catch or tough to find and touched and difficult to I guess to assess is because it's usually overt. Sorry, it's not usually overt, right? It's usually under the surface. It's comments that are made in passing. It's not an obvious event a lot of the times. So I'm wondering if aggressive is an attempt to make it more like it's something physical or something that you can see easily.
I don't know that was her intent, because she was trying to insert the word aggression under hazing and bullying, the very first sort of super paragraph before the definitions terms, that create an environment that's free of aggression.
She's trying to broaden, not
Yeah,
narrow.
She was trying to broaden, not narrow.
I would characterize, Sarah's efforts as really, I think, very forward-looking
Right.
at this. I think if we go back to the previous definition and the definition before that in the laws, I think they've caught up to us because we have been, sort of forward thinking on this content in the past, and I think she's helping us to continue to be looking forward at sort of various ways. And so I don't think that she was trying to limit in any way.
Right.
What's interesting is that the previous Region 9 policy was called aggression and violent behavior, and then it moved on to define bullying in most of the ways that the Easton and Reading policies defined bullying. And now the new legislation removes the term aggression, but expands the definition of bullying to encompass many of the same ideas. So I guess it's just a question of, will it be confusing possibly if there's something else that would require further definition?
I think before this was a rather lengthy examination by Sarah, and I'm thankful for that. I don't want to get caught in the weeds on any one of the changes because there are so many, and some of them, one of the administrative asks really seems important to me. So I think I would rather say, I think we've moved away from terms that are involving aggression, and we think the definition is as broad as it should be, and take that back at this point. If that's
and it aligns
okay
with our policy committee principles of keeping it simple where possible.
Right. Okay. The second, if you could scroll down where teen dating violence is used as a term, Sarah's suggestion here really does make analytical sense to me, but I'm concerned about changing it. She wanted to basically say that that the term teen dating violence implies that all violence within that dating is a circumstance that teens themselves identify. So sometimes they can have a relationship and not call it dating. I think that there's some merit to that, but I'm loath to change a definition term. But then again, there is some serious merit to the idea that not all relationships do teens themselves identify as dating. I think the rest of the statute or the rest of the policy could encompass that definition term. But I do see the merit in the idea of making clear that not all teen dating violence occurs in what we would traditionally define as a dating relationship.
It's interesting because dating itself is not defined, and you could
Correct.
really have a conversation about what that's intended to mean, because I think it's intended to mean what a lot of people would no longer consider dating per se.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I would also
But
say
I do think that came right out of the statute.
Right,
Yeah,
it
I think
did.
that's correct. And I think it needs a lot more work, because I think it also normalizes some of this behavior. If we just started talking about harassing, threatening, stalking, like nobody would say, oh yeah, that's dating. That has anything to do with dating, right? So why is it under teen dating violence?
Well, I mean, the idea that acts of physical, emotional, or sexual abuse are only really part of this situation if there's a dating relationship is its own sort of red flag.
That's right.
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 I had said to Sarah in my response to her that maybe we should just eliminate the word dating throughout. So you would say teen relationship violence.
I mean, what you might do is put a footnote there and leave the statutory definition and say that the boards direct the administration to construe teen dating violence broadly to include any, personal, romantic, physical relationships between individuals.
That sounds fine to me too.
Well, but I think a part of what I'm saying is that there are parts of this that are completely one-sided in terms of a relationship. If the perpetrator who may be stalking or harassing may have zero sort of reciprocation of that relationship. So even saying the word relationship, it seems like there's something we need to say, like, you don't need to be involved in a relationship for this to be considered part of the bullying.
Well, I mean,
Or
the next question is where
says reciprocity in the relationship is not required.
Exactly. There you go. I like that.
I mean, the question I would have is, that's just a definition, right?
Yeah.
Where in the policy do we use that defined term and how do we use it? Because if it's just throughout as bullying or teen dating violence, bullying and teen dating violence, it's sort of a redundancy and it doesn't make much of a difference anyway.
Bullying and there's 34 instances, bullying or bullying and.
Because if it's never used in isolation, this is sort of becomes.
Yep. I'm just looking through. So far it's all reports of bullying and.
Because a one-sided, I want to be in a relationship with you and so I'm stalking you would be covered under bullying regardless.
I think that there is merit in that footnote idea though, Chris, irrespective of that, because it provides clarity. It's sort of like we're writing a reg on that.
Right. It's forward-looking intent and or really more modernizing a statutory definition by direction.
Yep.
And I don't think, and Jason and Stephanie, you can stop us if this is going to cause you a problem, but this sounds more like we're just trying to clarify what is probably intended by the legislature anyway.
I think you're modernizing the policy, because I couldn't agree more with Sarah's sentiment here that students who are involved in relationships or even are simply the recipients of unwanted attention that rises to the level of what would be described in this policy are not necessarily in a dating relationship. So I agree with the footnote idea.
What's
my concern during the board meeting was that it was changing the legislative meeting.
Right. I would insert a footnote at the end of relationship, because I want to preserve the specific language from the statute so that there's no dispute that we're aligned with it.
Yep. And
then in the footnote, say the administration is directed to construe the word dating broadly to include
non-reciprocal relationships.
Just as from someone who is going to be investigating and digging into these facts and talking to students to determine whether there's any evidence of bullying, and it's part of our investigation. I can tell you that we are not going to get tripped up by whether it's dating, whether it's a relationship, whether they went to a movie and then went to, kind of like what we think of it as a date, and they went out for dinner and they went to a movie. That's considered a date versus doing something else which maybe isn't considered as a date. That is not going to trip us up. We are going to be looking at whether someone had a relationship, and we understand that a relationship is defined differently than it was for us and then how it is now. And I have 2 teenage daughters. And so, I think we understand that a relationship is even how the students interpret that there's some type of relationship and communication and so on. So I think that would be, you could certainly put that there if it would make people feel more comfortable, but that would be something that we would do in some type of administrative reg as part of our investigation into whether there's teen dating violence in any.
I think part of this is to signal to the community that we have a modern understanding of what teen dating is, less so that we feel that the administration needs this direction, more because we fully expect that you understand that the term teen dating is almost antiquated at this point in its own
right
sense.
And what's funny about that is that right below it, we're talking about mobile electronic devices and paging.
Yeah.
And photo optics.
No one has a pager.
Yeah. And photo electronics. Yeah. So Chris, the reason I didn't want to footnote it and instead sort of embed it in the parenthetical statement is just because I'm thinking about the average person reading this and trying to sort of keep the ideas sort of tight to each other. But if that's the sort of the only way to do this, I think we can add a footnote. I'm just trying to make it accessible for people like me.
Yeah, but your level of analysis of these is lawyer-like now, so that's.
I personally like the footnote idea because it keeps the language consistent with legislature, and it acknowledges that some member of the community had input somewhere, but it doesn't significantly change the language and the definition. Right? It's kind of, I think it's kind of.
It preserves the statutory language.
Right.
Throughout.
And I think as we move forward in policies, whether it's this policy or down the road and look at other policies, I think you need to preserve key aspects especially when it comes to definitions, I think.
I agree with you, Dr. McKinnon, that definitions, and I said that to Sarah, are something that I am loath to hardly ever change, right? So the footnote idea appeals to me for the same reason.
Okay.
But I think, John, I understand what you're saying, John.
It's fine. It doesn't matter. We're spending too much time on it. Let's move on.
Right. Okay.
I'm going to move the comment to the footnote and clean it up a little bit. And if you want, Maureen, you can read the next comment while I'm doing that.
Yeah.
Okay. The next comment has to do with page 4, and I'm going to gloss over these in a group because most of them are changing the substance of the language. There's a request to drop substantially from disruption on page 4. I think that is problematic for a number of reasons. There is request to change the dating violence language, which we just addressed. And in paragraph 20, apparently there's a reference to 2014.
That's from statute.
Yeah, but that's the statute. So she thought that needed an update. So we can gloss over those.
We have lots of silly policies with old dates in them.
Right.
Yep.
On page 5, the SSC coordinator and specialist, he's asking that they both require training, but this is a state policy. So I said, because it's a state policy, we're conforming to state guidelines. And if there's a federal requirement for training, we're not necessarily incorporating it in this policy. We're incorporating the state level requirements.
Right. I'd rather the administration have discretion to increase the training rather than mandate it because it comes with
Right.
cost.
On page 6, the committee must include one parent or guardian of student enrolled. And she is requesting that there be a student representative to the SSC committee.
There is one. But
There is one.
memorializing it in policy. Yeah.
Okay.
But there isn't at all levels, right? So at the elementary level, there are different ways that they gather input from students, but the students don't serve on the actual Safe School Climate Committee that meets before or after school.
Okay. And finally, and these were the suggestions that I really felt like the administration should consider, how the reporting actually occurs. And I didn't know the answer, right? And whether or not the school website can have some notation for the purposes of reporting bullying in an anonymous fashion.
So the anonymous reporting forms are on all of the school websites. I'm also in the process of developing a separate climate website that will be a standalone one place to find all of the relevant policies and reporting forms and the Safe School Climate Plan that's currently in existence, as well as goals and action plans, et cetera, et cetera. But they are currently, all of those forms are on the school website.
And how would the administration feel about having some type of a helpline that was, phone based for that purpose?
Well, it depends how we would. So the administration is going to have a duty, a responsibility to act if they are receiving a live call, regardless of the time of day or day of the week. So the only concern is that I would never want any member of our community to feel or be unsafe in any way if they're relying on that phone call as a means to stay safe.
Oh, you're muted, Maureen.
Because of the dog. And so you expect there to be a greater level of reporting in what is on the web than would be reported by a phone call?
I
guess
would
I'm
expect that
confused.
the
I don't know
reporting,
practically speaking what happens.
right. So the reporting, I would expect that if someone's filling out a paper report, it's not going to be something of such an urgent nature that's going to require action immediately, right? That if I'm in a situation that for whatever reason doesn't feel safe, that falls under our policies, there's going to be another way to reach out to someone. I just worry about the idea of an expectation that someone is going to respond to calls at any time of the day or day of the week.
I think, and I think you're right, Stephanie, but if we wanted to push on that, we could have a recording on there that says, if you are in, imminent danger, please hang up and dial 911.
Right.
Which, I've seen that on other places.
Like
before.
setting up sort of a voicemail box. This is,
Right.
Monitored, expect a response within X period of time. For a more immediate response, contact so-and-so, like a whistleblower hotline, basically.
Right.
You could certainly do that.
I looked into this in a previous district, and it sounds like a good idea at the beginning, and then you kind of play it down a little bit, and then suddenly, if someone makes a phone call or makes a report, and there's an expectation that you have to answer the phone, and you don't answer the phone, and something happens, and we went through this, and it involved Shipman, and they had to tread very carefully about this. I'll actually give you an example. There's a program called Say Something, which was out of Sandy Hook, and we went through the entire process, and essentially a 6 to 9 month process of training our staff, implementing a kind of a system. Students can send text messages. They could make phone calls. By the way, students are no one's making a phone call if you're a student. I don't know if the last time you've ever heard a student actually use and talk on a phone, but there was a way for them to send text messages, and there was an app set up and so on. We got all the way up until kind of implementation at the end, and including a kind of a pilot session. And we started to, and then we basically involved Shipman at that point, and that's where they put the brakes on it. Because if a student, and actually I think it may have been active on a pilot, but if a student sends a text message on a Saturday morning, well, who is answering that on the other end, right?
Yep.
And then we started to work through that as well, and then we said, okay, we're going to assign administrators. So an administrator is responsible to answer this app or this call at a certain time on a weekend. And so we played that out. And then the union kind of pushed back and said, okay, well then, is there a stipend for that? Right. So we said, okay, well, we're not going to do that. Then it's going to be central office people. So I was, as an assistant superintendent, I was getting text messages. And then so I would get a text message of bullying or someone who was unsafe. And I would essentially, the procedure was then to refer that to the dispatch, because in New Fairfield, you had a local dispatcher. But the local dispatcher wasn't a trained administrator. They only had the authority to call 911 or call an ambulance. And so you can see it kind of, we played this out. We studied this for a long time, and there are other systems out there. There's something called Say Something, and there are other kind of bullying app type programs, but they do run into the same barriers at some point, which are what happens if there's an after hours call? Where does it go? Who receives it? What happens if someone doesn't answer that call immediately, and so on. So
it does strike me like what you're describing, Dr. McKinnon, is that you basically became the middle person between them and some type of mental health outreach, and that maybe you need to take us out of that role of being the middle person and sort of direct them if they feel threatened or unsafe directly to mental health resources, rather than being the middle person or outreach resources, not necessarily exclusively mental health.
yeah,
I think that there could be a way to do this. It just requires budget.
As part of that, there was also, I think, an option which we explored, where you pay additional funds, and if someone makes a kind of a after hours call, it actually goes to a call center, and that call center evaluates whether that should be funneled to an administrator, to a social worker, to 911, to an ambulance, to a police officer. But the same problem occurred. In reality, it all goes back to an administrator at some point, right? Because as administrators, we care about our kids. We want to know if something's happening to them.
I'm in favor of a message on the website that really clearly says, if you feel you are at risk or in danger, please call with a number. My another concern about having any kind of an outside call center or agency involved is that what we found through experiences is that other agencies have a very different threshold for response than we do internally. And I think that we probably would want to support all parties involved and not rely. I mean, obviously, if there's imminent risk, that's a different situation. But there are lots of situations that say DCF or another agency might say, nope, this doesn't rise to our threshold, that sometimes surprise us. So I like the idea of a statement, sort of like making it clear, if you feel that you're in danger, please call. Right.
And I would think you'd want that for any mailbox, right? We're talking about an email mailbox, or we're talking about a text, a destination, or a phone call. It's all the same. It is somebody's reaching out, and assuming that they're always using the sort of best judgment for, email isn't really meant to be a real-time communication, channel. I think it still makes sense that maybe there's an autoresponder on the email mailbox, or even on a form that people are submitting, so that it says, thank you for submission, and that can come immediately. But it should come with by the way, if you are in imminent danger, like here's what you should do. If you're having thoughts of self-harm, you should contact this. If you like, to make sure.
Is this a policy or regulation at this point, or an administrative practice?
Maureen, what was the original suggestion?
The original suggestion as to this particular item was, and I'll read it to you. Can we explicitly state how we report bullying anonymously? Can we make it as easy for students as well as parents? Can we text a helpline number or an email address? This is particularly important for those who are new to the high school and not familiar with the process.
Yeah, I agree. We should make that as easy as possible.
Right. So it's not necessarily a text change so much as it is how do we get the information out there? And now Stephanie's clarified it is sort of out there, but maybe there's a way to make it more obviously so.
Okay. All right. And so administratively, we need to make it clearer, either on a website or some other avenue that we can support.
I think we've circled the wagons on whether or not we want some specific helpline. And I think the answer from that perspective is no. But the comments overall still seem to make sense that
Right.
this is a relatively new parent to the school who's saying this information isn't obvious to me.
Mhm.
Okay.
And the final comment here has to do with paragraph 19, which I cannot see on your screen. So if you could pull that down, John.
And what page was that?
I do not know what paragraph, what
The
page
four?
4. Page 4.
4.
This is a request to tell parents and guardians twice yearly, at a halfway point in the school year and at the conclusion of the school year. I think that may be relevant, particularly for first year parents. So maybe the way to sort of policy deal with this is to deal with it with first year parents explicitly at the beginning, and then keep the burden the same as it exists, but I don't know.
I like the mid-year check-in idea. There's so much information that we're consuming at the beginning of the school year. There's so many, sports are starting, and there's a lot to be dealing with. And so a specific call out, 2 or 3 months later helps to reinforce.
I think that's fine.
So I would assume that we would do that by regulation or 2,
Right.
as opposed to a
Yeah,
footnote.
I think that the
Right.
policy aligns with the statutory expectation, and by regulation, including it in a welcome to the new year email is fine.
Right. And that covers my summary of was presented to me.
Maureen, weren't there also a couple of, it seemed like typos that were brought to our attention the other night? There was one, I think it was plain language was the.
Yes,
in
it was plain
paragraph
versus
8.
plan. There was a text change. Yes.
And then there was
apologies.
one item that was written twice. I'm trying to remember now where it was.
I don't recall where that was written twice. I do remember the plain and plan, but
Yeah.
I think it was
Paragraph
not
8 on
right
page
where you
3.
are, John. It's somewhere else in the text.
Yeah, it was Mary Lee who brought it up.
Which paragraph?
Page 3,
Paragraph 8?
paragraph 8. It
Okay.
was the typo that was intended to make sure that board members read the policy. Let's see how many.
Right.
There
One pass.
it is. Plain language.
It's right there.
Right
Right where
here.
your cursor is. Yeah,
You're saying plan should be plain.
correct.
Yes.
Interesting.
Um,
I turned
and
a
this-
plane
this-
into a plan.
This paragraph
plain plan.
was brought to my attention by Chris Hucker also, who identified the plain plan issue and also said that the whole thing sort of read sort of awkwardly and wanted us to look at the language to see if we can bring clarity.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's a run-on sentence that would make an English teacher cringe.
Right.
I think we can keep the legislative intent by creating better clauses or sentences there in paragraph 8.
Specifically in 8.
8 in particular is
Yeah.
like a head scratcher. I get what it's trying to do, but you have to read it a few times.
It's where your cursor is. It's that's the problem.
Mhm.
Can't you just put in a semicolon after male and then say parents or guardians may refer to the plain language explanation?
I mean, I don't
Remove
understand
that.
why you don't flip the language so that it says not later than 48 hours after the completion of the investigation, comma, requires that not later than 48 hours after the completion of the investigation, each school notify parents of those involved of the results of the investigation.
That's fair
It's-
too.
It's the sticking the 48 hours in the middle of 2 clauses that creates a complete circus in the language.
I agree with you, Maureen, that if you take out that such and you inserted a semicolon, doesn't that work?
That's better.
Oh, did we lose Maureen? I think we lost Maureen.
Does this make it better or worse?
I like that.
So the only thing that I find a little confusing in this statement is that it says a verified act of bullying, and then it says the results of such an investigation. If it's a verified act of bullying, that is the result of the investigation, right? Because the investigation is looking at whether this is, there are lots of acts that are unkind, inappropriate, and don't rise to the level of bullying. But if it says verified, I find that to be a bit contradictory, or at least confusing.
Well, I think, when you actually go through the process, you're sending parents a letter and you're saying, your child has been a victim of bullying. And then you also provide parents with a separate document, which is kind of an investigation summary. So perhaps that's, you're telling them, plus you're providing them the information.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we do more actually than what's stated here, because we would provide them the notification that said, we did not find evidence of bullying under policy XYZ, or we did find evidence of bullying. So that's where I just think verified presumes that we did. And so it's not that if we didn't, we wouldn't follow up with those involved in the investigation.
I think the verified act of bullying, I'm going to guess, came right out of the statute. And so I was trying to make what is probably statutory language make some measure of sense in English without tweaking what the statute was requiring.
Right.
Even though I agree with you that what the statute requires doesn't always make sense.
I missed the beginning of this, but perhaps you can put a footnote or a reg that says the administration will, in its discretion, notify parents in advance of any verification of bullying. It's that the administration notifies whether or not the act is verified, right? So.
Right, and it's not necessarily that they're notifying in advance, it's just that the way this reads, you're only notifying if it's verified, and you're notifying the results of the investigation, which might be that it's not a verified act of bullying. So that's where it's confusing.
And you now notify if there's an investigation ongoing.
If there's an investigation, yeah, at the conclusion of the investigation, we would notify those involved of we've completed our investigation, and under this policy, we find that indeed there is a verified act of bullying, or we've completed the investigation and we have not verified confirmed act of bullying.
So perhaps we take care of what the administration does by regulation here. And we leave the administration with a lesser burden than you're actually taking on? Or would you like us to specify that you're taking on a burden that's in excess of what's required?
No, I think this describes the minimum standard, which is you notify someone after 48 hours that there's that you've completed your investigation and this is what you've found. We're going to do that anyway. We're going to notify them before, during, after. Right. We're going to notify you whether it was confirmed as bullying, whether it wasn't confirmed. We're probably going to meet with you. There's a safe school climate plan. There's all kinds of things that happen.
Right. This is a statutory baseline that we're just confirming.
It's the minimum standard that we're going to step over.
Do you have any concerns with the way the language has been tweaked here? Trying to establish a little more clarity.
I think it reads better than it did before.
It does. Do we need the words each school? Could we just change it to notification to?
I think it's that the plan requires that is the preface to this whole section.
Right.
So the district's program will require that each school notify those, because it could be students of multiple schools involved in a situation. If you've got bullying from a middle schooler to a high schooler or other things.
Right. But if we're saying that the parents, sort of all the parents or guardians involved are going to be notified, that the school part is redundant. No? I mean, I guess it's saying
you could
responsible for
change
doing it.
each school to the administration notify
Mm.
or an administrator, but I'm assuming each school came right out of the statute. And so I'm trying not to.
Yeah.
It ties back, when it says each school, it ties back to the Safe School Climate Plan and who is the specialist and what role they have
Right.
in the plan and so on.
Were there
I
any other
think we're
comments? on the
okay if
policy?
Stephanie is comfortable with this.
Requires that each school notify parents or guardians of all students involved in the verified act of bullying no later than 48 hours after the completion of the investigation. That actually reads like a human being sentence. If it's fine, it's fine, right?
I think it's fine.
Yeah. Okay. Was there anything else?
I think that covers it.
That covers the feedback I've received.
Okay.
We still just need to find that one number that's written twice.
Was
I
it a
can go
number
find my
that's
notes.
twice, or was the paragraph itself duplicated?
So there were different numbers. That's what was kind of interesting, but the
Yeah.
text was identical for two successive points.
Yeah.
And I don't have my board notes. in
Well,
front of me.
right here, they're
a
very
fun game.
similar, 9 and 10. But
No,
then
this
you
they,
go.
was identical, I think.
okay, requires each school to invite, and then here.
They're different, aren't they?
They
Those
are
are
different.
different, yes.
Yeah, by the
Okay.
time you get to here.
No, there are somewhere here, there are two paragraphs that are identical.
It's 17 and 18.
Yep.
Yep, that's right. I remember that. Yep, that's right.
Yeah, that's weird. Okay,
No, everything gets renumbered below it.
correct.
Or you could just say intentionally omitted and just leave it there.
It'd be nice for these to be actual bullets.
Right.
Well, John is renumbering.
Thanks, John.
Do we want at this point to take the committee action of recommending the policy as revised back to the tri-boards to be adopted? And if so, I think we want to be clear that it is our recommendation that it replace the existing policies on these topics in all three boards, because they are slightly different across all three boards as far as where they're filed. And do we want to propose a number that is associated with this to resolve that question?
Yes, as to all of the above, save I do not know what number you would propose.
Number 6.
Changes.
These are all in the 5,000s. What did
It was
what did
50
CABE initially call it? 5141 or something?
I thought it was 5321, but give me a sec.
5131 911 is what the current policy is in Reading.
And
What's
that's
the
the
number
name
of
is
those?
Easton.
I don't know whose idea it was to have the suffix be 911 for the bullying policy, but it like
Can you say that one more time, Chris?
5131.911. That's in Reading. I think it's the same in Easton, but I'm gonna look.
It is.
Okay.
And it's close to the same in Region 9. It's only the last part is different.
Right, 5131.21A, aggression and violent behavior.
Do we have a 5131 straight? Yes, it's student conduct, and then all of these are subs. I see. So gang activity is 0.9, hazing is 0.91, and bullying is 0.911 for reasons that I'll never understand. I assume it's because they all flow from that, but right. So I would move that the policy committee recommend to the three boards the adoption of the, actually, you know, before we do that, John, can we change the name of the policy at the top from hazing and bullying to positive
Yeah,
school
and
conduct?
I was applying the changes as well. We're calling this what, bullying?
Positive school climate.
Even better.
I mean, you could say positive school climate and response to bullying, 5131.9 something. If you want to keep 911, that's fine.
The 5131.911, it's since I've read that policy so many times and actually typed it, so I recognize that. That's the identical number in New Fairfield. It's probably the standard CABE number.
Yeah.
It is.
And which, by the way, we updated to the complete policy manual from Shipman.
Mhm.
I think did I talk to you about that?
Mhm.
The process.
Briefly.
Okay, so we went out to an RFP and essentially looked at three different services. One was CABE, one was Pullman and Comley, and the other one was Shipman. And we did a wholesale adoption of all Shipman policies, all series, except bylaws, in two readings, essentially. And what's interesting, Shipman does not name or number any policies. They're all searchable in a database by just typing in bullying or sexual harassment or budget or transfers, whatever the term is. That's how they do it. That might be a discussion for another time.
We can notice that.
Yep. So yes, 5131.911 standard bully is a standard CABE policy that you probably see in a lot of districts' websites.
Yep.
So I would move that the policy committee recommend to the three boards of education the adoption of the positive school climate and response to bullying policy as policy 5131.911 to replace existing policies 5131.911 in Reading and Easton and policy 5131.21A in Region 9.
Second.
Good. Any discussion? Good. All in
Thank you,
favor?
everyone, for the feedback on this. Aye.
Unanimously approved.
You have to take it by roll, John. This is a virtual meeting.
I saw you raise your hand. All right. I heard you say Chris. Maureen.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. I also vote yes. That is 3-0. All right. All right. So we're recommending to the boards for Tuesday that this be the version that we go through on a second reading. I'm going to prepare a sort of slide deck for this so that we can make sure that people are aware of what they're approving. We'll also distribute this right now so that people have an opportunity to read it. And then if need be, we can have a discussion.
Thank you. All I gotta jump. Do you want to adjourn or do you want me to just lose your quorum?
No, let's I hear a motion to adjourn from Chris.
So moved.
Thank
Second.
you. Thank you, Maureen. Good. I
Thank you,
vote
everybody.
yes. Let's do that. Thanks, everybody. Adjourned at 9:55.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.